There's no.
And we can always type in chat here. Okay. So for anyone who's just joined, we're just going to take a few minutes here and open up the poll questions. And once we reach about 7:05, we'll get started. And yeah, we'll just give some people some time here. So I'll start the poll if you don't mind starting or filling it out there. And then we'll get started once the poll is finished. So we'll just give a few more minutes to let people join the webinar, and then we'll get started. And if you haven't already filled out the poll question, if you could go ahead and do that, that would be great. And, we'll close that once we start the webinar, and we'll review the results in a little while. Do you think we should give it a couple more minutes, Annette? Yeah, okay. We'll give it a few more minutes here. Okay, we're gonna get started here. Okay, so if you have any questions throughout, sorry about that. No, I'm going to get to that, the questions in a moment. My name is JP. Welcome to the WeRPN Quarterly Research Webinar titled A Thriving Clinical Practice, Finding and Using Clinical Practice Evidence, Part 2. Tonight, we will be reviewing the methods to find, assess, and use evidence to enhance your practice. Please submit your questions in the question and answer or the chat section of Zoom found at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have time for discussion and for your questions to be answered throughout the presentation. I will now ask Annette Weers, the Senior Director of Professional Practice and Research at WeRPN, to begin our evening.
Thank you, JP. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. The focus of tonight's webinar, as JP has already shared, is finding and using clinical practice evidence to enhance your practice. As the presenters share their knowledge and skills, their objectives are to provide a review of the hierarchy of evidence and how to find the evidence, how to address a challenge or problem in your practice setting using research evidence, the benefits of using a structured article extraction tool, such as the Metropolitan University of Toronto tool, which is the one we'll be demonstrating tonight. And finally, how an RPN research fellow moves evidence into practice. So we're really fortunate to have our presenters here. The presenters will demonstrate and guide you through a step-by-step process on how to find quality evidence and research articles resulting from a clinical issue or challenge. Then we will be using an interactive format with the speakers demonstrating the process, articulating the pitfalls, and effective tips from one of your suggested issues. And as all of us nurses know, being members of the College of Nurses, this knowledge and skill is important for all of us in practice. And it is an expectation of our practice that we use evidence-informed practice to support our patients and clients in whatever setting that we work in. So we hope this webinar will enhance your understanding and ways to find evidence to support your practice. So let's begin our evening, and I'll start by introducing our speakers. So tonight's presenters are returning from part 1. First, we have Jen Calver, who is give you a little wave there, Jen. There she is. Jen is an RPN and a very accomplished RPN. After completing her bachelor's and master's degree, she is currently pursuing her PhD in health sciences in the Community, Public, and Population Health program at Ontario Tech University. And her work is focused on workforce development, quality of work-life issues, healthy work environments, and the care of older adults. Her current research includes exploring resilience of RPNs in home and community care, and advancing palliative care for persons with dementia in long-term care through micro-credentialing programs. Jen was awarded a WeRPN 2022-23 RPN Research Fellowship, where she joined a research project exploring staffing stability in long-term care, led by Dr. Winnie Sun, also at Ontario Tech University. And she has been awarded an Ontario 2023-24 Queen Elizabeth II Graduate Merit-Based Scholarship in Science and Technology. That's such an accomplishment, Jen. Congratulations. Our second presenter is our host for the evening, JP Munro. And he is an RPN, a professional practice associate with WeRPN, but he also continues to work in a clinical role in teaching hospital. And his past experiences include home and community care, and he holds a diploma in business management and is currently studying in the Bachelor's of Health Administration program at Toronto Metropolitan University. JP attended part 1 of the research webinar, and it spurred his interest about some challenges in his clinical role. So welcome, Jen and JP, and we look forward to learning more.
Thank you very much, Annette.
Thank you, Annette. We're very happy to be here with you today. I look forward to our discussions and exploring the literature. JP, do you have the slides to share, or do you want me
Yeah,
to share?
I can share them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start off by reviewing some of the slides that were presented for part one, just to give us a little bit of a foundation, and then we'll switch it up a little bit and go into one of the electronic search engines or databases to find a scholarly article, and we'll work through it together. So we're going to get started here. And JP, do you have the results of the poll question? No.
Yes, I'm going to pull them up here. And the results are shared on your screen there.
Okay, so it looks like we have it looks like we have long-term care, we have students maybe. When we're looking at able to use research to improve or change my practice, we have a lot of confidence, which is fantastic. So our interactive session will be very great. I'm able to find research articles that help improve my practice, is somewhat confident, which is great. So when we have a chance to go through today, hopefully that will help move that up to a little bit more confidence. I'm able to read and understand research articles, very confident. So we have a really good starting point here. That's wonderful. So we'll just advance to the next slide. So this slide was from our first webinar where we were looking at the different types of evidence, and this graphic was published by Gray and Grove in 2021, and they called it the hierarchy of evidence. So starting at the bottom, when we're reading expert opinion articles or commentaries or brief reports, that's good evidence. It's coming from people who are experts in the field and they're sharing about a particular topic. When we get into some of the better quality articles, when you're looking at evidence, this is where we start to look at or unpack some of the method-specific papers. So you might see randomized control trials, quasi-experimental studies, qualitative or quantitative studies. And so the article will really focus on that one study in that paper. When we're looking at the best reviews, or the best evidence, we might want to turn to literature reviews, depending on our time available. And literature reviews capture the multiple studies in one article. So when we had our colleague Ben here with us in the first webinar, I thought his comparison was great. So what he did was he looked at it through just that idea that nurses don't have a lot of time. So we want to find one article that has done all the work for us, that one-stop shop. And so looking at lit reviews or best practice guidelines pulls everything together for us. So we want to find the best deal in a hotel. So if we want to start with a good and get those expert opinions, we might call the hotel and ask for their rates. And here, by doing that, we can find out a lot of information. Some of the cons might be the person on the other end of the phone might only know about that particular hotel. So it really could be biased based on who picks up the phone. When we're looking at the better articles, the better kind of hotel prices, we might start using a search and look up a hotel on a website. So we can search around the website and we can find lots of information, but there's no added context about how that hotel relates to other hotels. So when we want to look at the best hotel or get the best deal on a hotel, there's these sites or companies called Trivago or Expedia who have already done all that work. So they've already gone and looked at all of the hotels and they pulled it all together in one spot. And here we can find all the prices, the reviews, the amenities available, all in one location. So that one-stop shop. And so there's nothing wrong with the good or the better options, just that when we're looking at the best options and literature reviews, we know that it's gone through this rigorous process already, and we can see that comparison in those. So when we're looking at articles, we do want to pay attention to the type of article it is. Thank you, JP. You can go to the next slide. So we talk about how to find evidence and research articles. And there are so many subscription databases. There's a mountain of them, too many to name here. Some examples that we have listed here are PubMed, Medline, CINAHL. And so one of the things with the electronic databases that have these scholarly articles on them is that they could be subscription-based databases. So to access them, you need a subscription. So here's where we encourage you to reach out to your employer or your school where you're alumni of and see if you can access these databases. And during the first webinar, we highlighted or went through a couple open access journals and how to search through those journals. Now, these open access journals, they're publicly available, so anybody can access them. We went in to explore the Nursing Open, and we explored Google Scholar. Another one is Sage Open Nursing. So as you get comfortable with searching, you'll come across more open journals as well. So on this slide, you can see an example of the Metropolitan University of Toronto article extraction tool that Annette mentioned in the introduction. And so this is a type of data extraction tool that can help us organize our thoughts and start that critical appraisal process. So we're going to have an opportunity to dig in and to use this tool. A lot of people, when they're doing different types of research and want to focus in or do any comparison or just, again, organize ideas, this is a way to do it that it's nice because you can pull all the information and you can just look at it. So we'll go into the next slide. So as we move into the interaction section, I want you to start thinking about some of the challenges that you might be experiencing in practice. What changes do you want to make in your practice? And what topic do you want to know more about? I had an opportunity to speak with JP before our webinar, and he was sharing this fantastic story. So I'm actually going to invite JP to get us started about his experience during that first webinar and where he ended up today, and then we'll move forward. JP, do you want to?
For sure. Thank you very much, Jen. So yeah, when I was listening to that first webinar, there's definitely some things that stuck out to me and I reflected on a little bit. I really like the point that you brought up actually just earlier. There's the one-stop shop. I've found in the past, I often think that the more articles that I have, the better my paper is going to be. But I think really finding those high quality resources, like Jen mentioned, literature reviews or studies that just are as specific to your topic as you can get. Obviously, you're not necessarily going to have something that speaks to everything, so you will need to use multiple resources, but the quality I definitely was something that stuck out to me, and something that I think I need to remind myself as I'm in school right now as well for my Bachelor of Health Administration. So I'm writing papers and I'm doing research. So that was one of the things. In the past, I have used Google Scholar and and I believe Sage Open Nursing as well, when I didn't have access to the database that I have at Ryerson, or sorry, Toronto Metropolitan. They've changed the name there. But so I do have some experience using those databases. I think one of the things that I learned using those databases was just that you need to be a little patient. Sometimes the articles I found, especially even today or yesterday when I was looking at some articles for this research webinar, just to try and get a feel for Google Scholar again and find some articles, it really, I just kept finding that I kept meeting paywalls, basically is what we call them, and so you have to pay to access that article. So it took a little longer, but I just realized I need to be patient because I'm going to find something that kind of speaks to me, and so I did find something, which also made me think of it's probably good if you can't find something on Google Scholar, consider trying one of these other databases, because they all have different algorithms for how they pull information, and they may have different articles. So it's always good to try and use all the resources that you have. And keywords was something that really stuck out to me as well. I find when I'm researching, keywords is really something that sometimes I use too many, sometimes I don't use enough or don't use the right ones. And so I found that just trying different searches, which is something that I've definitely learned in our past webinar and kind of knew a little bit about prior to it. So I've just really, even now within the assignments that I'm working on, been trying to focus more on my the keywords and changing it up, changing the way I arrange my sentence when I'm searching for something, or using other words that may be related to the topic I'm researching that I didn't have in a previous search. So that's kind of a little high-level overview of my my takeaways from our last webinar. Yeah, so I think I mentioned being patient is really important. Like when I was going through Google Scholar today and yesterday, it does take time. One of the things I found while I was searching as well is don't be afraid to go to the second page, sometimes even the third page. Often, I know when I use Google non-Scholar, the regular Google, I focus on the first page primarily. I don't find that I get the search results I'm looking for right away. Then I just figure it's not there because I find later on it's not as relevant. But I found with Google Scholar, a lot of the research and the papers on the second and third page were actually quite relevant. So I think it's just a different way of extracting the data that Google's trying to extract. It's probably a little different with their Scholar search engine versus their primary search engine. So, that's just something that I found. And I did find an article. Do you want me to share that article there, Jen?
Yeah, so what I was going to do, JP, is I'll share my screen. I have so JP had an opportunity to go through it, and he did send me an article that was of interest and relevant to his challenge. So answering these 3 questions. And so we thought we would start there. JP, you brought up a really great, fantastic points and advice. You definitely can skim through. I'm just going to share my screen here. Oh, okay.
No problem.
There we go. So you're absolutely, let me see here. You can see that okay? It's Google Scholar?
Yep. It's showing there.
So, one thing JP mentioned is that not all the articles are going to be available. Some of them might be behind a paywall. But what I would do in that case, one of the great things here is that we can save the article and it will go to our library here. And we can read the abstract. And if it's something as we get scrolling around that it's an article that we really want, that's when we can go into some of the other open databases or go to our employer and say, hey, I really, really want to read this. We can reach out to some of our other nursing friends and say, hey, how do I get access to this? And then we can do that. My library is absolutely full. Sometimes if you start to get very excited about a topic and you're saving a lot, Google will tell you that you're saving too much and you need to take a break. But you just come back on the next day and it will let you go back and save more to your library. I have typed here in the search bar here, nurse retention and mentoring programs. And this was a topic that we were discussing a little bit when we were preparing for this webinar around some of the experiences JP was having in practice. And so when I click this search, we have about 64,000 results. And this is without any filters. So when we're going down the left-hand column here, everything's open. We haven't clicked anything. And another thing, JP, that you mentioned is words. So watch what happens if I just simply remove the word and. So our search changes. We had more, didn't we? 65.3, 64.5. So we reduced it just a little bit, just with that one word. So you can imagine all the different search strings. And so the article that spoke to JP was this efficacy of a mentoring program on nurse retention and transition into practice. So we can see that it's been cited by 13 people. It was published in 2018, the author, and it's published in the International Journal of Studies in Nursing. And so we can go into that. And we have it here, and we can read the abstract to see if this is what we're interested in. We can see the background, the methods, and the results section, just to give us an idea. So if you can't access the full article here through Google Scholar, save it to your library and do kind of look into it, or maybe you'll come across a similar article that does have open access.
And actually, this one I think does, if you click PDF there, it actually opens the full article.
This one does. So I did go ahead and download it here already in prep. Yeah, thank you, JP.
Yeah, no worries.
So here I'm going to split my screen.
Can be like a scavenger hunt trying to find the right article.
Oh, absolutely. There's some fantastic articles here. We can see role acquisition, socialization, and retention, unique aspects of mentoring programs. Now, this is in a tertiary care teaching facility, so we might want to explore that one a little bit. The value of mentorship within nursing organizations. So this says healthcare organizations broad. So it depends on what we're looking for and really how we want to drill down into some of the data and information.
Could I just ask a question? JP didn't share what his initial question was and how he got to this article.
Yes. So actually, I was looking for mentorship related to retention. So I believe my exact search was nursing retention through mentorship, and that's what came up. It was on the, I think it was on the second page. But it
so
was,
I just changed the words here, nursing retention through mentorship. So you can see it changed our search results here just by changing the few words that we typed into the search box.
Completely different.
Yeah, so I think that's something to be, well, it's definitely something to be aware of when you're typing, and just being mindful of the different words and the different operators that you use to combine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you're kind of getting articles, and here's where, I mean, we have several pages of this topic. We can narrow it down further if we want to do a sector or a type of nursing category. But what we'll maybe do here is go through this with the data extraction tool. And as we're doing this, if anybody wants to put in the chat any practice areas or search areas or challenges that they're experiencing, and then we'll create a second search to go through some of the articles.
I just wanted to comment though on how easy it was to, put your thoughts into a few keywords, and you can get like 60,000 or 45,000 hits. So, Google Scholar makes for now, a lot of those would be what JP calls paywalls, but still, it even just reading those few lines on the page really starts to create that inquiry juice in you, and makes you want to look harder.
Mhm.
So
Could
And
be
I
those
actually-
conversation starters, right? Oh, sorry, JP.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to say, I actually kind of missed that. I think you probably mentioned it in the first webinar, but just that you can use Google Scholar as kind of your initial search, and then use a database that has more like access, whether it's through your school or through your employer, to find that specific article. I never really thought of that, because sometimes I find those databases are difficult to navigate, but Google Scholar has just I don't know what the algorithm is there, but it just seems to produce a lot more of what I'm looking for. So that's a neat idea that I'll have to use.
fast and simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was amazing that you found exactly what you were looking for.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to answer or just speak to some of the questions on the slide there, Jen, relating to this article?
We can absolutely, we can do that. Or should we extract some of the data and then we can link it maybe with your clinical experience? Is
that sounds like a good idea to me. Yeah,
just because when we're looking at the articles, exactly what you said, we can get lost. There's so much information when we're searching through the data, right? Nancy said 65,000. So how do we know we're pulling out the evidence that we want? Do we know that the information in this article is going to match any of the other mentorship articles that we just saw in Google Scholar? So here we can take out a few of the points and use this data extraction tool. And we might want to do it with a few mentorship papers, especially if we were wanting to start a new mentorship program, or, we just want to have some conversations with our colleagues about, hey, this is really working to retain staff in similar workplaces, or in other countries, this is what they're doing. And it's really great to give us a foundation to bring back into practice. So JP, maybe what we'll do is, we probably won't answer all of this. We'll go through author's name. So you can take that, because you'll start to recognize where the authors work. So this author is a nursing supervisor from Indiana. So this is a paper that was published from the United States. And it's a recent one. So we can populate all of that in here. Your journal is really helpful, because we can start to think about, this is an international journal of studies, so we can look at the fact that the audience for this particular manuscript is thinking internationally. The title.
And then, Jen, you mentioned that it's a recent article. What kind of time range do you suggest is recent for people when they're looking? Because like times comes up, 2000 or 2004, 2000, like what would you call recent?
So I think that's a great question. I do think it depends on what it is we're looking for. So when I'm doing some of my research, I usually have a 5-year timeline, a 2-year if it's something that's really rapidly moving through. Some of the virtual reality reminiscent therapy and dementia care, when we're looking at those VR pieces, that's technology that's just go, go, go. So I might only go back 2 years. But when we're looking at advancements in dementia care, I might want to go back a little bit further, because we know that's been an evolving field and there's been a lot of information. So it just depends on the topic. If I'm looking at an organizational structure, so a long-term care or policies related to home and community care, I might want to go back a little bit further to get a full picture. So I might want to go back in the literature about 10 years.
Yeah. So topics that are pretty dynamic, less time, things that move more slowly, are things like policy. You look a little bit further back. That's a good kind of rule to follow.
JP, when you're searching, do you do What would be your rule of thumb?
I usually 5 years. Again, yeah, actually, now that you mentioned, depending on the topic, I've gone further. If I find it's hard to find research in that particular topic that's recent, I try and I stay as close to present as possible. But I usually base mine based off of what I'm finding. But I think using Google Scholar first is going to help me find more in the future. So hopefully I won't have to do that as much.
Well, and that will, when we flip over and do another quick search with other keywords, we'll narrow down the search so we can see the difference between the 2 years and 5 years, because we can do a custom range in Google. Yeah, so this is when we're looking at the data extraction tool. So this links back to that one slide we talked about with the hierarchy of evidence. So what type of research is it? And usually most abstracts will tell you what type of it is just in the introduction. If we really want more information, we're going to scroll down to about the middle of the article and go right to the method section. So this one here is a quantitative study, which and it's a retrospective descriptive quasi-experimental study. So if we think back to that one slide, this is going to be our better articles. It's not a review, so this is going to be very focused on their area, their program that they're looking at. Summarize the research problem. So this could come out. JP, did any of the research program, the research problem stand out to you?
I was looking, it's a little further up. I'm just looking at the article as well. They have the problem and purpose statements there that were quite clear there. Right, yeah, right there.
Yeah. So most research articles, especially method articles, will have that aim or objective statement, or they'll list their research questions right out. So JP brought us down to the purpose. So we can just simply copy and paste. And this might seem a little bit tedious and time consuming, but when we're going back and we're trying to make sense of everything that we've read, it's nice to look at these snapshots of the articles, and then we can start that critical appraisal process to see what it is that we want to bring into our organization. Sorry, I put that in the wrong spot. And the sample size, so there's our literature review in the article. I'm just going to go a little bit quickly here, but I definitely encourage you to play with it with a few different articles on your own. Theoretical framework, a hypothesis. So this is, so the abstract printed at a couple sentences of the methods. This paragraph here is going to be a little bit more detail about what it is they do. And here's where you want to pay attention. And as you get reading more of the articles, the methods will start making more and more sense to you because you'll become familiar with some of that scientific language and jargon that they use. But we see that they're using a questionnaire. So they're interacting with their participants through a questionnaire. The setting I always find interesting. So this is a small community hospital in northern India. The participants worked in an intensive care unit, so an ICU, medical surgical unit, and the emergency department. There was 14 beds, and it was managed by RNs and a unit manager. And so I always look when they're talking about their sample as well as how do they define their sample? I'm seeing that there is some discrepancy sometimes when I'm going through. So in this case, they're looking at nurses and they're looking at registered nurses. So I always kind of look and say, how are they describing their workforce? So here we go. So they have new graduate nurses, 18 years of age or older, who are registered nurses and hired within the 6 months of the mentoring program. I'm trying to look for the number of participants.
I think in the beginning it said 20. It was pretty far at the top though.
Where do you see that, JP?
I thought earlier, I think it's closer to the introduction.
I see 26
method.
beds was staffed and surgical floor was 20 beds.
If you go up to the top where it says method, it's right at the top near the introduction and abstract. It says.
Oh, it's in the
total-
abstract.
Yeah. Yeah, in the abstract there under method.
Okay. And then here too, we want to go back down to the body. So we want to describe, we might be interested to describe the characteristics. So again, their job titles, age, the floors that they worked on, how long they've been working, if that's some of the information that will help us answer the question that we had. So in this case, we're interested in the mentorship program. So that this data extraction tool has it written right under there. So we would populate all of that. The data collection methods, we talked about, it was a questionnaire. No, excuse me. And then we have the key findings and results. So most articles are laid out. They start out with an introduction to provide context to the research question. This one elaborated on their problem and purpose statement. And then we go down, we have a theoretical framework. So theoretical frameworks, models, we might see what are some of the other things that we might see that underpin the study, philosophies. So that will help guide the direction of the research, and you can see where it fits in. And then this article has been very thorough about how they're defining their terms. Sometimes that will be in the appendix. Setting, okay. Ethical considerations is something that we're going to want to be very cognizant of as well. As nurses, ethics are very, very important to us. So we're looking at privacy and confidentiality. Was it very protected? What did they do to make their participants comfortable? If it was an interview, so that's not this study, but if it's an interview, where did they do the interview? Did they do it in the middle of their workplace, or did they do it in a nice private location where they might feel a little bit more comfortable to share? Was it their managers recruiting them, or was it how were they getting information about the study? So that's always very interesting as well, just to give you context of how the study was carried out. So they give a lot of detail here. So we can extract any of this data and pop it in here, depending on what we're looking for. Like what is it? What information do we want? And then near the end, we have the results section. And there are times that this can get quite scientific. We see chi-square statistic analysis, and we will see maybe linear regressions, or we'll see, and if you're like me and are a little overwhelmed with statistics at first, that's okay. They'll describe it and they'll break down those numbers to give meaning. JP, I see you took off your mic, and I know you're right in that statistics.
That's me right now. It's a lot. But I think it's intimidating at first, but once you really start to break it down and understand some of the foundational concepts, it's not as intimidating as it seems at first.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's so funny because when I first started, I was very intimidated. At some of the results section, it's all tables and graphs and all numbers, and you start seeing
different formulas and stuff.
Standard deviations, and you start seeing your means and frequency distribution. So it's nice that they will explain it. And then here in the discussion section of the findings, this is where the authors are looking at the results of their study, because they shouldn't be putting any of their viewpoints or context into what the participants are saying or digging too much at the results section. But in the discussions of finding, they have an opportunity to provide context to their finding that helps them answer their research question. And then most articles will tell you what the authors viewed was a limitation to their study. So sometimes we can add another column here in the data extraction tool. This limitation is that it was at a small community hospital, so it might not be generalizable to a larger hospital in a bigger city. So if JP was working, because this is, you might want to look at, I work in a larger hospital in a city, how could this information support me in my practice? And then the authors will sometimes give recommendations for future research or recommendations on how to, move this forward into this knowledge mobilization or knowledge translation. And so if we thought this article was really good, then we'd want to do the data extraction tool and save that information and tuck it away and sit on our topic a little bit and see what else is out there. This article, I think one of the strengths of this article is that it's very clear when we're looking at the methods and frameworks, they're very clearly describe it so that it matches, as I said, that better section of that hierarchy of evidence. We know that they're focused in one topic area, so they haven't considered context of other things. So they haven't looked at other hotels and put it all together in one spot for us to view. But they have provided us some valuable information that we might be able to take forward in this. So JP, as you were going through this article with your question, did you find that it answered your question, or how did it relate to your practice?
Well, I think retention has obviously been something that is affecting many organizations in Ontario, and the organization I work at currently as well wasn't immune to that. We saw a lot of turnover and a lot of really great nurses I think not feel very supported. I was hearing that actually from some of our new grads coming in. They just felt they were quite anxious, and I informally would mentor. I had mentored a handful of the nurses, but I just in my work at WeRPN had learned about formal mentorship programs and how effective they can be. And so it's something that when I was researching these articles, that this one stuck out to me, just because I feel like it's something my unit could have definitely benefited from. It's not easy being a new grad, and myself, I definitely had my own experiences as a new grad, and I think the article did a great job at explaining the background. It went quite in depth, I thought, and then also just the data that it produced showed that people who were engaged in a mentorship program stayed longer, and so it's I think it's something that as we were going through the pandemic and as we started to face some retention issues, especially with our new grads, it definitely could have benefited our unit.
You brought up one really, sorry, I'm just going to pick up on something that you said. The background really spoke to you for helping to add context. And so this is an example of a literature search. It's not a full comprehensive review, but they've gone in and they've looked at things to help them rationalize their research question or their aim, or support it. So here we see citations. That takes a little bit to do to get used to seeing the brackets as you're reading through the research article. I used to blank them out, but now I'm very interested to see where they're getting this information from. And so when you're looking at the background and you're like, okay, well, this cost savings, that seems really high, or that's amazing. So we might want to go down to the reference list and hand search it, and then start looking for those articles, because maybe those are the articles that can help us address our research question, or they'll complement this article, or they'll contrast it. So it'll be really interesting to sometimes do that as well.
And seeing those, that's a good idea too, just to be able to validate the the things that they're pulling out as well. Because that was one of the things that stuck out to me, was those dollar figures, and just it's a significant amount of money. And I just having been in my Bachelor of Health Administration for some time now, it's just kind of given me a little bit of a different perspective and looking at utilizing resources effectively. So I definitely, and I think when we're utilizing resources effectively, we're able to spend in other areas that may need it. So that's something that kind of also caught my
So
attention.
when you also use that literature review section, you're kind of saying, will the context that was surrounding this article apply to what I'm trying to do? And because nurse retention is an issue across the board right now, and mentoring has, for the most part, the literature review will say mentoring has a role. So you have a good chance that if this is a well-written article, the implications for practice may really speak to what you could do as a next step. So like, what would you do as a next step here? Like, you've got an article that's got some recommendations, implications, seems to apply. What do you think the next step would be if you were going to put this into your, like, tomorrow?
For sure. I think some sort of pilot would be a really interesting thing to try. And I think that it's something that could be very effective. And I think that the leadership would be open to it, because it's not, I don't think it has to be super resource heavy or labor intensive to implement a program like this. And I think it's like, there is data to support it. So I think I would probably approach my manager and just discuss the possibility of implementing a little pilot on our unit. I find our unit has a lot of, there's kind of a lot of very experienced nurses, and there's a lot of new grad nurses who have graduated in the last 5 years. And there's no formal connection between the two. And I find that the more experienced nurses who have been practicing for over 20 years, many of them, they do mentor, but it's not as formal. And I think developing those more formal connections would definitely be beneficial through a more formal program.
I think that's a great suggestion, JP, to speak to your leadership on your unit and share the article and talk about some of the pros on your unit, right? That could support something like this, and have that conversation as a starting point.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned earlier, Jen. Before I brought it to the leadership, I would definitely look at the articles that they're getting their information from, so that I can make sure that it's it's just a good source. And then if I found that it was a good source, I think the potential for decreasing cost would help gain buy-in from my leadership by seeing that there's a benefit to them, because they're trying to manage budgets and everything. And so I think I would definitely try and make sure that the sources are solid, so that I just have a strong argument when I brought it to my leadership.
Yeah, I think, I second on that. Having that well-defined, it almost is, you're describing a proposal. You're proposing this idea, supporting it with evidence. So that'll be very helpful for them to understand where we're coming from. I know we've had some discussions with some other nurses that are like, I'm bringing evidence forward. I want them to hear it. I'm showing them the evidence, but they're not listening. And I always look at it, I've learned actually from my own experience, because it's been sometimes a journey, and I've experienced that frustration myself, going, it's in the evidence, look at the evidence. One, things always take longer than we think they're going to. And two, sometimes people need to hear something more than once. So sometimes if we are talking with some of our colleagues and getting a feel of, is there an interest in this area to pilot a mentorship program, and what is the culture of our organization that will support it? And then you have that support as well when you're having those conversations at the leadership table. I think that'll help help to see that pilot unfold.
Yeah, and I think JP mentioned, you know, what's a mutual benefit to the person that maybe has a little more decision-making power than you do. So you have that conversation about, do you see this as a challenge? And if you agree on a challenge, then the chance that a proposal is better received using evidence as your base, you have a better chance of success. Mutual, like I think in Cotter's change management process, he uses the term a burning platform. So a better way of seeing it is a mutual challenge, right? Because you don't want it to be adversarial. You want it to be collaborative and mutual, and a conversation, as you say, launching a conversation, as you say.
Yeah. And the other piece I'll add to that, Nancy, as well, is this. So remember, on the hierarchy of evidence, this article fits into the better methods, and is providing evidence. But when we are considering the context of the organization, the funding models, the type of people that we're caring for, the community, that it might change how this evidence could be implemented. So this particular study might not be able to be replicated within our own organization, but it certainly can launch this conversation and starting point to build something that will work. And then we support it with, I mean, maybe there's another article here in the reference list that will help to shape us, that's similar to our experience. I'm just noting the time here. We were going to go in and look at another review, but maybe what I'll do here, just to wrap up this search, is we just unpacked a methods article, which was a great article and very, very rich discussion. Retention is certainly a trending topic area right now. So when we're looking on the left-hand columns, if we want to see nurse retention through mentorship, is what JP mentioned, we could click on the filter here for reviewed articles. And we just saw 46,000 drop to just over 8,000. We can also filter it. So Nancy was asking about timelines and what would be helpful. So with retention, we know that retention has changed a lot in the last even year. There's been more initiatives provincially. There's global efforts coming forward. So maybe we'll only want to go back a couple years. And so we just reduced our search to 1,000. Maybe we want to go from before COVID. So we pick 2019, and you can see that we have 3,000 articles. And then so when we're looking at this, you can also zone in. Maybe you want to look for Canadian articles. Maybe you want to look for long-term care articles, home and community care. I think we have students, so maybe you want to focus on student placements and mentorship programs. So you can definitely use your search to type in different areas there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Is there any questions from anybody in the chat?
I don't see any right now.
Okay. So.
Hey, well, thank you, Jen and JP, for bringing this information forward. It was great to have a question that JP had, a real practice question from his experiences in his clinical practice, and finding an article and having Jen go through it with him. I think that was really beneficial. It certainly helped us understand both types of evidence and unpacking the process of critical appraisal and extracting information from those research articles. I thought that tool was fantastic. Especially if you're, I remember researching and pulling all these articles and I'm thinking, which article was that? So that tool is great. It gives you that snapshot so you know exactly what it's about. I think that's really a fantastic opportunity. And I think that your demonstration of the step-by-step process of finding evidence without the assistance of a librarian or an expensive resource, it was a very effective way for all of us to learn. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to now ask Nancy our research consultant, if you could tell us about some of our research activities to wrap it up.
Thank you, Annette. Thanks for hosting the webinar too, and thanks to our presenters and JP for you putting in the logistics of this webinar. So I'd like to share some exciting WeRPN research news. The Awards of Excellence for Research have opened. This is the second year these awards have been offered, and the application is open until July 31st. And you can find it on the website. There are 2 awards, one for an individual RPN who has demonstrated excellence in research, and one for an organization that has demonstrated support and encouragement for excellence in RPN research. This is a wonderful way to acknowledge the effort that your RPN colleagues, managers, and employers of RPNs who have grown their intent to be curious and evidence-informed, promoting better care and outcomes. So it's a great way to acknowledge their efforts. Other research activities underway are that we have 4 research programs in partnership. One is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada Partnership Engagement Grant, and it's on the resilience of RPNs in the home and community care sector. And it's currently under data analysis right now with a MyTax grant extension to create resources specific to home and community care sectors personnel, and what the content of that is to facilitate personal and professional resilience. We have a second one, a Healthcare Excellence of Canada grant regarding co-designing a virtual pieces care planning framework and toolkit in long-term care homes. So this one's the long-term care sector. These resources will support how to implement and use the framework to promote shared decision-making with residents, their families, and caregivers, and the long-term care healthcare team, inclusive of RPNs. And it's important because it will ensure choices around virtual care are based on residents' needs and capabilities, their care requirement, and the clinician capacity. We found in an earlier study that although virtual care was uncomfortable at first and somewhat difficult if you didn't have the right equipment, it really enhances the team environment for the patient and family. Third, the Begin Bridging Educational Grants and Nursing Research team has a province-wide survey out right now asking nurses to complete a brief online survey about perceptions of working in different Ontario healthcare sectors. Recruitment is underway, and if you haven't already clicked the link, please do so. And fourth, we have 2 22-23 WeRPN funded academic research projects wrapping up in June, and 2 RPN research fellowship projects, one of which, as Jen mentioned, was hers. And then this month, the WeRPN call for research proposals, academic research proposals, and RPN research fellowship proposals closed, and the awards will be announced with funding beginning in July 2020. So thanks to all of you, finally, thanks to all of you who have responded to recent requests for participant recruitment. We have a couple coming out after Nurses Week around mental health conversations with care providers and aging Canadians, and another one around employment trajectory of Philippine educated and Filipino Canadian nurses in Ontario. It's really important that you as RPNs continue to participate in these research projects, because your voice is heard that way and will be able to grow the evidence that's needed to continue to advocate for RPNs. So thanks for that opportunity to say about the research projects, and back to you, Annette.
Okay, well, thank you, JP, Jen, and Nancy. I really appreciate all your knowledge that you've shared and this great learning opportunity for everyone in our nursing community. Thank you to all of you who joined us this evening for the WeRPN Research 2-part webinar series, A Thriving Clinical Practice, Finding and Using Clinical Practice Evidence. In this 2-part series, we have learned that evidence comes from many sources, such as peer-reviewed academic articles and studies, which can be difficult to clarify, interpret, implement, and use. RPNs need supplementary information and training on finding, access, assessing, and translating types of evidence. And not all RPNs are in a position that are supported with accessible librarians, databases, professional practice mentors to find and use evidence. But there is a way to find practice supports with evidence. And you guys were really great at sharing your knowledge and how we can do that. and we need the perspective of RPNs in research. So please continue to participate in the studies when you see those emails come into you. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Good night.
Can I just thank WeRPN for opening up this opportunity for RPNs to be represented in research and get involved and to show us how to get active. I'm very, very thankful for this opportunity, and I look forward to seeing all the research that comes out about RPNs. We're seeing more, and so it's going to be very exciting in the next few years to see what happens with RPNs and the evidence.
It is nice to see RPNs involved in research. I mean, you are doing a PhD, which is amazing. We'll be leading research that will support the value of RPNs in healthcare. But it's also wonderful to see the fellowships and the nurses that are actively participating. So you're right, it's an exciting time for RPNs in research.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.